The spaghetti bolognese you call Italian was never Italian, not the way you think. That plate you put on the table so many nights hides an origin that points to 3 corners of the planet, and none of them is Italy. The tomato in the sauce comes from the Andes, the wheat beneath it, from a dry hillside in the Middle East. And Bologna, the city named on the plate, will tell you the dish doesn't exist. How all of that ended up on a single fork is stranger than any recipe admits. I traced it through published genome studies, botanical records reaching back to 1544, and Bologna's own culinary archive. 3 weeks, 1 thread at a time. By the time this ends, you won't look at a plate of spag bol the same way, because every part of it points away from Italy. Everyone knows bolognese is one of Italy's proudest old recipes, but the people of Bologna don't cook it, and the red sauce you call traditional couldn't have existed on an Italian table 200 years ago. Picture the plate, a nest of spaghetti, a deep red meat sauce clinging to every strand, a drift of Parmesan on top. Ask almost anyone in London, New York, or Sydney what that is, and the answer comes without a pause. Italian. Properly Italian. The kind of recipe a grandmother guards and hands down like an heirloom. That story is everywhere. Open a cookbook anywhere in the English-speaking world, and there it is, sold to you word for word as the authentic Italian classic. Spaghetti, minced beef, tomato, a snowfall of cheese. It's become one of the most trusted images of Italy on earth. But cross the border into Italy, and the image cracks the moment you arrive. Because in Italy, this dish isn't treasured. It's barely tolerated. One report put it bluntly. In Italy, spaghetti bolognese has long been a poorly regarded recipe, an intruder inside a far richer tradition. An intruder, not a treasure. The plate the rest of the world holds up as the face of Italy is one most Italians quietly disown. So the story already wobbles, but the real problem isn't taste or pride. The real problem is time. Look closely at that sauce. Its whole identity, the color, the richness, the tang, comes from one ingredient, the tomato. And the tomato is the thread that unravels everything. Because the tomato is not an old world plant. It never grew in Italy. It never grew anywhere in Europe. It came from the other side of the planet, from the Andes, in South America. And it didn't reach European soil until after 1492, when Spanish ships began carrying strange new plants back across the Atlantic. The first time anyone in Europe even wrote it down was 1544. An Italian herbalist, Pietro Andrea Mattioli, described it and named it Pomodoro, the golden apple. But here's the part that breaks the myth in half. He described it as a curiosity, an ornamental oddity, not food. For the next 2 centuries, that's all it was. Europeans grew tomatoes to look at, not to eat. It wasn't until the 1700s that people in Italy actually put them on a plate. Sit with what that means. A red tomato sauce sold as an ancient Italian tradition isn't just unlikely, it's impossible. For most of Italy's real history, the Rome you're picturing, the Renaissance you're picturing, there were no tomatoes in Italy at all. The sauce couldn't exist, the plate couldn't exist. So the old country classic on your table isn't old, and it isn't cleanly from the country whose name it wears. Which leaves one question standing. If the sauce can't be ancient and Italy disowns the dish, where did the word bolognese even come from? The answer is waiting in the last place you'd expect to hear this dish, called a fake, in Bologna itself. In March 2019, the mayor of Bologna had had enough. Virginio Merola picked up his phone, opened Twitter, and fired off a message to restaurateurs around the world. Stop serving spaghetti bolognese. Then, on Italian public television, he said it in plain words. Spaghetti bolognese, he said, doesn't actually exist, yet it's famous all over the world. He called it fake news on a Trump-sized scale. Sit with how strange that is. The mayor of a city, going out of his way to publicly deny the most famous dish carrying his city's name. Not overhyping it, not marketing it, denying it. Because to him and to his people, that plate isn't misplaced pride. It's a misunderstanding with their name stuck to it. And when you dig into why he says it, the crack from a moment ago splits wide open. Because Bologna does have a pasta dish with a meat sauce. But it isn't that one. It's called tagliatelle al ragù. And every word of that name matters. Start with the pasta. Not spaghetti. Tagliatelle. Fresh egg ribbons. Flat and slightly porous. And it isn't a whim. It's physics. Dry spaghetti is round and smooth, so a heavy, fatty ragù slides right off it. The flat ribbon of tagliatelle catches the sauce, grips it, carries it to your mouth. In Bologna, they're so certain of this that bolognese sauce simply isn't served with spaghetti, ever. They take it so seriously they put it in writing. In 1982, the Italian Academy of Cuisine deposited the official ragù recipe, with Bologna's Chamber of Commerce. A sealed document, ingredients fixed, and the pasta, named outright, tagliatelle. They even revised it decades later, in 2023. It's one of the few dishes on Earth with a notarized birth certificate, and nowhere on that certificate does the word spaghetti appear. So the tourist who arrives in Bologna dreaming of ordering spaghetti bolognese gets a small shock. They ask for it, and the waiter shakes his head. No such thing here. What you want is called tagliatelle al ragù. The dish of your childhood, it turns out, is a ghost in the city that named it. Then comes the detail that finishes the block. That word, ragù, which sounds like the most deeply Italian thing you could imagine, isn't even Italian. It comes from French, from ragout, meaning, roughly, to wake up the appetite. The name of the stew crossed the Alps out of France. The pasta was local, yes, but the very idea of the sauce carried a foreign passport from the start. The pattern starts to show. The dish is named for a city that rejects it. The sauce wears a name borrowed from another country. And the ingredient that gives it its color crossed an entire ocean to arrive. None of it was born where it claims to be. But notice that everything we've seen so far is history. Dates, letters, records, one angry mayor. And history can be argued, qualified. An expert can always say, yes, but. There's a kind of evidence that can't be argued with. It isn't written by humans, signed by no academy, and it doesn't care what a cookbook says. It's written inside the ingredients themselves, in their DNA. And when scientists finally read it, it said something no cook in Bologna could ever have guessed. A genome is, at heart, a record. Every plant and every animal carries inside its cells a very long text, written in 4 chemical letters, copied and passed down generation after generation. And when we domesticate something, when we farm it for thousands of years, we leave fingerprints in that text. Marks of selection. Scientists learn to read them. So instead of asking a cookbook where an ingredient comes from, they now ask the ingredient itself. Start with what holds the plate up, the pasta. Pasta wheat is durum wheat, Triticum durum. Follow its genetic trail backward, and it doesn't lead to Italy. It leads to an older domesticated wheat, emmer, and from there to a wild grass that still grows wild in one very specific corner of the planet, the slopes of the Karakata Mountains, in the southeast of modern Turkey, the heart of the Fertile Crescent. Around 10,000 years ago, in the Neolithic, someone there began gathering that grass and planting it. That was the first step, and this isn't romantic guesswork. In 2017, a team published the wild emmer genome in Science, and that map let them trace the domestication step by step. 2 years later, in 2019, another team published the durum wheat genome in Nature Genetics, comparing 81 varieties to pin down its origin. The DNA pointed to the same dry hillside the archaeology points to. 2 ways of reading the past, one answer. So the foundation of your Italian dish was born more than 1,000 miles from Italy, thousands of years before anything called Italy existed. But wheat is the easy part. With the tomato, the science gets more interesting, because even the scientists don't fully agree. The cultivated tomato, Solanum lycopersicum, descends from a wild plant with a fruit the size of a pea, called Pimpinellifolium. In between sits an intermediate form, the cherry tomato. In 2014, a study in Nature Genetics sequenced around 360 kinds of tomato to reconstruct that story. And this is where the account splits in 2. The classic version says domestication was completed in Mesoamerica, in what's now Mexico. But in 2020, a paper in Molecular Biology and Evolution turned it around. Its data suggests that intermediate tomato was already half domesticated much earlier. In South America, in the region of Ecuador and Peru, in the Andes, before it ever traveled north. Some researchers even argue the plant may have partly gone wild again along the way. I won't pretend this is settled, because it isn't. It's an open question geneticists are still arguing over right now. But notice that both versions agree on the one thing that matters for your plate, whether it's South America or Mesoamerica. The tomato is American from start to finish. In no version does it pass through Europe. In no version is it Italian. And if you want to close the circle, look at the meat. The cow in your ragu, Bos taurus, descends from the aurochs, a huge, wild, now extinct ox. In 2015, a team sequenced the first complete nuclear genome of an aurochs in genome biology and compared it to more than 1,200 modern cattle. The verdict? Domestication happened in the Near East, near northern Mesopotamia, around 10,500 years ago. Again, the same region of the world as the wheat. Again, not Italy. So there it is. written in 3 separate genomes. The wheat, from the Middle East. The tomato, from the Andes. The cow, from the Fertile Crescent. 3 continents, not one of them Italian. Which opens the only question left. If these 3 things were born thousands of miles apart, and thousands of miles from Italy, how on earth did they end up together on the same fork? 3 continents, thousands of years, and still, all of it had to meet on a single fork. The question is how, and the answer doesn't start in a kitchen. It starts on a ship. When Spanish conquistadors defeated the Aztec Empire in 1521, they began shipping strange plants back home. Among them, a vine of small fruits the Aztecs called tomatal. The port of Seville was the New World's gateway into Europe, and from Spain the tomato slipped into Italy, partly because the Kingdom of Naples was under Spanish rule at the time. By 1544, it was growing in Italian gardens. But as we saw, nobody ate it. They looked at it, and here's a legend worth telling carefully, because your audience deserves the truth, not the pretty myth. Through the 1700s, the tomato was nicknamed the poison apple. The story goes that European aristocrats ate tomatoes and died. The most repeated explanation says the rich dined on pewter plates loaded with lead, and the tomato's acid pulled that lead out and slowly poisoned them, while the poor, who ate off wood, were fine. It's a beautiful story. The trouble is, it may not be true. Chemists like Joe Schwartz of McGill University take it apart. The amount of lead a plate would release in a few minutes is tiny, far too little to kill anyone. The likelier cause of the fear was simpler. The tomato is a cousin of belladonna, a genuinely poisonous plant, and people connected dots they shouldn't have. But notice the detail that does hold up, because it's the one that matters. It was the poor of southern Italy, in Naples, who first dared to eat it. Not the courts, not the luxury cookbooks, the people with nothing to lose. And that changes everything, because it means Italian tomato sauce was built from the bottom up. The first written tomato sauce recipe in Italy appears in Naples in 1692 in a book by Antonio Latini, a cook serving the Spanish viceroy. And what did he call it? Tomato sauce, Spanish style. Even in naming it, he couldn't hide where it came from. The sauce still had to marry the pasta. That took another long century, and it too happened in the south, not in Bologna. When pasta and tomato finally came together, they did it in Naples, far from the city whose name the dish wears today. So we have the sauce from the south, the dry pasta from the south, and a name, Bolognese, borrowed from the north. All it needed was a force to blend it and fling it out into the world. That force was hunger. Between 1880 and 1920, more than 4 million Italians fled poverty for the United States, and millions more for Britain and Australia. In the peak years, close to 750,000 people left every single year. They were humble people, many from the south, and when they arrived, they cooked with what they had. Fresh egg tagliatelle was fragile and didn't survive the ocean. But dry spaghetti was in every American shop, cheap, and all but immortal. So they took the ragù they remembered, or had heard of, and poured it over the spaghetti they could actually buy. And in that meeting of need and memory, a new dish was born. One their own grandparents in Bologna would never have recognized. The dish you now fondly call spag bol. It isn't a broken version of an Italian recipe. It's something else. It's an emigrant's dish, invented by poor people far from home, with their hands full of the little they had. And the most surprising part is who first wrote it down, and where. Because it wasn't in Italy. It wasn't even an Italian. The most Italian dish in the world was first written down by a woman from Wisconsin. Her name was Julia Lovejoy Cuniberti, and she wasn't born in Bologna or Naples or anywhere in Italy. She was American. She married an Italian from the region of Modena, spent time in his homeland, learned to cook its dishes, and in 1917 she did something no Bolognese grandmother had ever done. She wrote it all down, in English, for American kitchens. The little book was called Practical Italian Recipes for American Kitchens. And she didn't write it for money. This is the middle of the First World War, and Italy is bleeding on the front. Cuniberti sold the book to raise funds for the families of Italian soldiers. Each copy cost 50 cents, mailed out from an address in Janesville, a small town in Wisconsin. Sit for a second with where we are, thousands of miles from Bologna, in a town in the American Midwest, in a wartime charity pamphlet. There, on those pages, is where someone first wrote that this meat sauce could be served over, in her own words, macaroni or spaghetti. And that one line changed everything. Because until that moment, ragù meant tagliatelle. Cuniberti opened the door to spaghetti, and once it was open, it never closed again. In the United States, there was no tradition of fresh egg pasta. Dry spaghetti was everywhere. It looked enough like the Bolognese ribbon to do the job. And so, without anyone officially deciding it, spaghetti beat tagliatelle, and the dish Bologna never cooked became one of the most famous on earth. Now, I'll be honest with you, because this is exactly the point where I should be. Historians don't fully close this story. The exact origin of spaghetti bolognese is still debated. The most cited version points to Italian emigration to the United States, with Cuniberti as the first written record. But another line of thought places its birth in the Italian restaurants of Britain after the Second World War. And at least one Australian writer claims his country published the first real recipe of the dish. There's no single father. What every version shares is the thing that matters. None of them leads back to Bologna. All of them place it far from Italy, in the hands of emigrants or of foreigners. And there's the heart of the whole thing. Gather the pieces we found along the way. The wheat in the pasta comes from a hillside in the Middle East. The tomato in the sauce comes from the Andes. The cow in the ragù comes from the Fertile Crescent. The word ragù was borrowed from French. The sauce was first cooked in Naples and called Spanish style. And the finished dish, with spaghetti, was pinned down in writing by an American in Wisconsin. In the whole of spaghetti bolognese, there isn't one single piece that originally belongs to Bologna. Not one. The dish the entire world raises as the flag of Italian cooking is, looked at closely, a map of the whole planet, except the place whose name it carries. It isn't a fake dish. It's something far more interesting. It's one of the most successful immigration stories ever cooked, and it was hiding, all this time, in something you probably had for dinner this week. So the next time you twirl that spaghetti onto your fork, look closely at what's in front of you. It isn't an old dish from an Italian grandmother. It's a passport with thousands of stamps. Every bite is a journey across 3 continents and 10,000 years, disguised as a Tuesday dinner. And here's what should really keep you up tonight. If the most authentically Italian dish in the world turns out not to be Italian, what else on your plate is wearing a label that doesn't belong to it? Because spaghetti bolognese isn't the exception, it's the rule. And there's another dish, even more famous, even more sacred to Italy, that the whole world calls Italian without a second thought. Its real story is stranger than this one. It starts the same way, with that same tomato carried over from the Americas. But what happened to it next looks nothing like what you think you know. That's the one you need to see next. Tap the video on screen and find out what pizza never was.